Welcome everyone to our Facebook Live today. I'm Nancy Bronstein. I am a PFAFF educator, and I'm coming to you from my sewing room in Western Massachusetts. I have three people helping me behind the scenes, and they are scattered across the country of Meredith, Amy, and Ryan. And they will be feeding me any of the questions that you should have, or you should post, so that I don't get distracted as I'm trying to tell you some new stuff in a consistent manner. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to talk about one of my favorite new features in the PFAFF Creative Icon 2, and that is projection, both in sewing and in embroidery. But before I get into that, what I want to do is share with you one of our brand new products. And that is the magnifying lens set. It comes with three separate lenses, a 1.25 magnification, a 1.5 magnification, and a 2 times magnification. And it comes in this nice box to keep them all pristine. And this is the adapter that will attach it to your icon, and it is compatible with the PFAFF Creative Icon, the original, the Performance Icon, and the Creative Icon 2. And I'm going to show you first how you attach it, and then I'll show you how you use it. So I'm going to change my camera angle. Ruh-roh, what happened there? Okay, my phone went to sleep there for a sec. It's not supposed to do that. Okay, so what you do is underneath the icon, there is a little area that it's right in the corner here, and it's a slot to stick this up into. And you just get it lined up, and it goes right into place. Maybe I should do that a little bit closer for you to see. Then you get your magnifying lens, and that pops right into place. Now, it's a little bit hard. It's actually more than a little bit hard to capture how great this is on the camera because of lighting and how the magnifying lens throws the light, and it's challenging in our home studio environments. But I'm going to do my best to show you what a great thing it is. So I'm going to move my camera, so bear with me. Hope you don't get seasick here. I'm going to try to keep the movement to a minimum. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So that's without magnification. Then if I bring my lens over, you can see how much better you see. So that's with the lens. This is without the lens. With the lens, look at that needle, the eye of the needle. Maybe I should unthread it so you can see the eye of the needle. So see, you can see the eye. Ooh, don't you love that? Okay, then let's pull back. I'm going to move my camera again so you can get the big picture and zoom out. Now, when you're done using it, it just goes right back there and hangs out until you need it again. So could that be more convenient? And I'll tell you, last week I was at 4 different stores, and at each store, about half the class ordered these things after they tried them. So if you're like me, I have trifocals, could be a blessing. So that's the latest new thing in the PFAFF universe. And what I'm going to show you now, though, we're going to shift gears and we're going to talk about projection. You're seeing some of my phone. Oh, you know what? My phone went to sleep, and instead of putting the correct camera, my camera where you don't see the phone doodads on it, I picked the wrong one. So just bear with me a minute, and I'll get this squared away. Okay, so now this should be better. I hope that you were able to see clearly the magnifying lens demo. Was it okay, everybody in the background? It was still clear. Okay, good. So little bit of a snafu here. I was speaking to the people helping me earlier, doing these Facebook Lives all by yourself, and with people in the, far off helping you with the interface. Doing them by yourself is kind of like one of those organ grinder people we used to see. I'm aging myself, where the person was a one-man band, and they're playing the kazoo and they're playing the drum, and they've got a monkey that they're trying to keep under control, and it's all these things going on at once. That's what it's like doing these Facebook Lives. So just bear with me when there's these little glitches, and the staff in the background will alert me, and I'll correct them right away. Okay, so projection. Now, I'm going to go over projection both on the screen of the icon 2 and what it looks like on your fabric. So I'm going to be going back and forth so you can see what it looks like when we make certain changes. So I'm going to go over to my screen here. And right now, this has just got a decorative stitch loaded. If I want to turn on projection, I can touch this icon that looks like a pyramid to me, or on the head of the machine, right above where the start stop button is, there is another button that looks like a pyramid, and it will turn it on the head of your machine. But on the screen here, I'm going to turn it on. And when it turns on, it changes color. And those of you that have a creative icon are hopefully aware of the fact that you can choose different color schemes for your screen, and your screen may have different colors. But in general, when we work with this interface, when you turn, like in this color scheme, when I turn something on, it becomes orange. So you will have a set color scheme that when it turns on, it's generally a lighter color. And so right now this is off. And when I turn it on, the on becomes orange. Now, when you first look at this projection screen, it looks like, oh my gosh, that's so complicated. But you will, over time, just become like very quickly, very comfortable with it. And it will look different depending upon which of the many options you have open and which you have closed. So I'm going to start by closing all of them and then opening them one by one so that you can become familiar with what they do. So right now, everything is off. I've just turned the ability to use projection on. Then when I turn it on, as I said before, it becomes a lighter color. And what it actually does is it turns my work light down so that I can see the projection better on my fabric. Now, right below that are your brightness settings. If you have something like this or this, I would recommend you change it to the brightest setting. I have never had an instance where the bright was too bright. I always like, in general, like more light. More light is better. That's where more is better. So then we have a background color setting. For sewing, I would recommend you leave the background color as black, which basically means that there's no background color. You are just going to see projected your lines and your grid lines and your stitches. You're not going to see a block of color behind everything. We could turn it on, but I would leave it off. Black means that there's no color, but there are many colors that you could use, but I don't feel it is an advantage in sewing, but it definitely is in embroidery. So the next option is stitch preview. When you have just a line with the name, one after the other, those options are closed down to make the interface more simple or cleaner. And you open them up by touching the greater than sign. So then that pops it open, but it doesn't pop it on. I'm going to touch the on button, and now stitch preview is on. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in 1 second while I get the thread out of the way here. Actually, bear with me a minute. My thread is not cooperating. Okay. So when I turn on stitch preview, you could use any color that you want. I mean, if I wanted to, I could make this a different color. You have all of these quick colors to choose from, or you can use these sliders and make up your own color. But for stitch preview, I tend to leave it just white. And then as far as I somehow ended up with gray. So let's go back. We want white. So now I've got white. And then what that looks like on my fabric is I actually see my stitches. So I really love this feature because of the fact that without sewing a stitch, I can look and see what something's going to look like next to something else. So say you want to do lines of decorative stitches. You may think in your head that something looks good next to the other thing. One stitch looks really good next to this other stitch. But when you place them next to each other, you may change your mind. Or you may look and see that, oh, I like how it looks, but that one stitch is kind of overshadowing the other. So I think I need to make it wider. And by using the stitch preview, as you make that stitch wider, the preview will get wider. So it really does help you to preview what that stitch is going to look like without even putting the needle to fabric. Another reason why, or another application of why I like this so much, say you have a border on a wall hanging or a placemat or quilt or whatever, and you're looking at it and you think that border, that really needs something there. It's just too plain. But by using Stitch Preview, you can look and see exactly what it'll look like and whether it's the right width. And I'll show you what I mean. So I can put this under the needle and look at this stitch and see whether I really like that. You can't see it as well on the camera. I can see it very well. Let's move the camera again. This is very challenging, but there you see it now. So I can look and see, well, does that fit in that space as I pictured it? Does it need to be longer? And does it need to be narrower? And so forth. So it's just really, really handy feature. Now, going back to our screen here. So that was Stitch Preview. Now I'm just going to turn it off and go through the options one by one so it doesn't hopefully get confusing. So I'm going to turn it off and then I'm going to close it so it's not taking up space. Now, oh, I lost my fabric. We'll take this one. There it is. Okay, so we're going to go down to grid. So again, when it's closed like that, you touch the greater than symbol and it will open up that possibility. And then it's off currently. I'm going to turn it on. And the grid is very customizable. I can make the grid, the distance between each grid line smaller or larger. I can change the color. I can, if I have a grid like this, I can move it over slightly one way or the other. I can change the angles so it's like this. So there's all sorts of things you can do with the grid, and I'll show you. So here's the grid. Maybe if I get in a little bit closer, you can see it a bit better. So there's our grid. And I turned off the Stitch Preview. I'm going to turn that back on so we can see the two together. So you see here, I've got this decorative stitch, and then I have this grid side to side. Now, what I would do with a big stitch like this, in order to help me to keep it straight, I'd make my grid lines a little bit closer together. So this grid line is butting up against the side of the edge of the stitch. Maybe if I bring it in a little bit closer, you'll see what I mean. And there we go. So I would move this grid line over just maybe a millimeter and this one a millimeter. So just make it maybe 2 millimeters more narrow. So on the screen, I would do that by going into grid size and maybe taking it down to 8 millimeters. And that looks pretty good. So now you'll see that, if I can get the camera properly, that really will inform how I stitch and help me to keep that decorative stitch straight. So going back to our options here, now I'm going to turn off the grid and close it. Now I have 2 stitch guides. The stitch guides are basically straight lines. So I'm going to open up the first one, again, by touching the greater than sign and then touching on. And right now this stitch line is, the stitch line is set to be red and a length of 100 millimeters. The width is 3. And the vertical and horizontal position are also kind of obvious where it's horizontal and vertical, which means that generally all I would ever do is I would move it this way or that way. So, so that I could line up lines of decorative stitches. And I find that incredibly useful. And I'm going to show you that in just a minute. Sometimes you do want to make it wider so you can see it better depending upon the fabric. And I'll show you what that looks like. So right now I have the red stitch guide right down the middle of that stitch. And I'm going to make it wider. And it will just basically look bolder on the screen so you can see it better. And I'm going to leave it a little bit wider than I usually use it so you can see it better on the camera. Okay, so there's our stitch guide. Now, to use this, I'm going to do a line of decorative stitches, and then I want to line up another line using my stitch guide. So I'm going to switch my stitch to something a little bit smaller. So I have this nice decorative floral stitch. And I have previously drawn a straight line. For the first line of decorative stitching, I will put a straight line. And then after that, I'll use my stitch guide to keep everything straight. So I'll put my needle, I didn't get my needle on the line, so I'm going to move it over slightly. Oh, I know what it is because it's not starting in the middle. Okay, so we're going to be fine. Oh, there we go. Got it. Okay, so once I start stitching, the stitch preview is going to go away, but I am going to watch this red line to make sure that I stay on the line that I had drawn. And of course, I need to thread my needle because I had unthreaded it before. So you can see, I'll pull it back a little bit so you can see our wonderful needle threader. So just put it through these slots, put the foot up, hit the button, and now it's threaded. I just love that. Okay, so now I'm going to start stitching my decorative stitch. That's good. So I have this line of stitches. And I want another line of stitches to be parallel to this line without having to draw a line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over and I'm going to move my line over so I can use that as a guide. And I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to go back into my projection settings and open up my stitch guide. And you can also make this smaller or bigger by touching the corner with the dots. Or you can scroll up. And I'm going to move my stitch guide over to, I think 10 millimeters is what I thought would look good. That looks good. So now what I'm going to do, when I do my next row of stitches, I'm going to make sure that as I stitch, that I've moved my red line over. It was in the middle of my stitches. I've moved it over 10 millimeters, and I'm going to stitch keeping that red stitch guide skirting along the edge of my previous row of stitches. So I'll try a different stitch this time. Just going to load another stitch here. Okay, so I line it up, and typically, if I'm not using this technique, I would kind of have my eye more on the needle. As I'm sewing these, though, with the projection, I'm looking more at my red line. So you can do row after row of decorative stitches and keep them all parallel that way. Now, some of you who are used to sewing these decorative stitches a lot are probably aware that some of our stitches are very wide, like they could be 24, 30 millimeters wide. And as you're stitching that, what's going to happen is your fabric is going to kind of go like this. So the red line is not always going to stay on the border of the other side. When you are doing those stitches, it would be good to use the grid. And I'm going to show that in a minute. But in general, when you're sewing these very wide stitches, your fabric moves a lot because the stitch is wide. But what you don't want to see, again, your fabric is going to move side to side. What you don't want to see is it going side to side and then all of a sudden going on an angle. When it starts to angle itself a little bit, then you really need to nudge it back to straight. So it's going like this, not like that, because otherwise you're going to go, it's not going to be straight. So that's something to look at. And also, if you are using just one line, what you would see is you want it with a large stitch, it's going to go like this, but you don't want to see that line all of a sudden become on an angle. That means you're going astray and you need to make a correction sooner rather than later so that it is again straight in relationship to your last line of stitches. So while it may not, with a large stitch, it may not skirt right along that stitch, it should stay parallel. You shouldn't see it going like this. That means you're going off into the North 40 and it's not going to look good. Okay, so that's using one stitch guide, and we have two, and we still are going to go over the grid. So let's go back to our screen here and open up the projection menu. And by the way, you probably cannot hear it on the over the microphone, but when you do have projection on, there it's a strong light and there is a fan that cools things off. So there'll be a low hum the whole time that you have projection on. That's normal. Don't worry that there's something wrong. That's just the way that it works. Okay, so I've been asked a question. What foot are you using? I am using the 2A foot, and which is, for this stitch, what is recommended on the screen. So, whoops. On our screens, on the icons, up in the upper left-hand corner, it'll tell you what foot is recommended. It will tell you if stabilizer is recommended. It tells you the stitch number. And I'm going to show you what the icon 2 shows you that no other machine in the world does. So when you put on a different foot and it is not the foot that is recommended, it will show you in orange. If it's a standard foot, it will show you in orange what that foot is. Will tell you what it is, and the fact that it's there now, it's not recognizing it because of all my lights. The fact that it's in orange, it means it's not the recommended foot. So once you see something in orange there, it will that means it's not the recommended foot. You can use it if you want, but what's recommended is the foot that's listed up above. Now, I didn't pull out my zipper foot, but if you put on, or take a step back, our zipper foot is a great zipper foot, but for some reason, there's a certain number of people that want to put it on backwards. And if you put it on backwards, it will go on. And what you will see in that upper left-hand corner is it will tell you that it's on incorrectly, and it'll be in red. So that is one of our newest features called and it's part of the artificial intelligence, where it is recognizing the standard feet that are on the machine, and you will not have any message if you have the right foot. Up here, you will not have any message that would be blank there if you have the correct foot up here. However, if you have the incorrect foot, it'll be in orange. If you have the foot on backwards, it'll be in red. So if you have the icon too, it's good to always take a look there quickly before you start to sew. Eventually, they will be adding recognition for other feet as well, but currently it's the standard feet. So let's see, we got a question. How do you guide it once you reach the end of your drawn line to keep it straight? Well, for my very first line, like this line here where I did the flower, I would draw the line all the way down. Then I use that as my reference point using my stitch guide that as I'm going along, that's going to parallel that line of stitches that I just stitched out. So as long as I can keep this row parallel to this row for the entire length of that row. But the very first row, I would draw a line for the entire part. I just did a little bit to save time. So that's how I would do it. Now, with these bigger stitches, you may want to think about going to the grid or for other applications. So I'm going to go back to our projection window, our screen, and open up the projection window. And we have the stitch guide on. I'm going to turn that off for now. And I'm going to close that stitch guide box and open up the grid. Turn that on. Now, show you what it looks like. So I've got this fairly small grid. Let's move this closer so hopefully you can see it better. So I'm going to go into the stitch menu and pick a wider stitch. So you can see that I went back to the stitch that I had when I first started talking. And I had previously changed the width of the grid so that the grid lines are just right on the outside of that stitch. Now, as I stitch this, it is going to go kind of like this. But what I don't want to see is that you start to see the grid being on an angle. That means that you're going astray. So I actually, for the very first line, normally I would draw a line for my very first line, but we'll just forge ahead here. So I'm going to start to stitch this out. Now, what I'm eyeballing is that the grid is not going slightly askew. I want it to stay straight. And then when I do the next line of stitches, the grid is even more helpful. So if I wanted it to be spaced about, well, I probably want it spaced about like that. I'm going to start by I'm going to watch this grid line over here. Maybe I can get this coming in a little bit more. So I'm going to want to have this top part of the stitch right up here on the grid line. And I'm going to start to stitch and keep that. I want that grid line to parallel my red stitches. Now you see it's going to go over and then it's going to come back because it's such a wide stitch. But and if you look at it right now, you can see that this is still parallel. If I start to see it going like this, where it's no longer parallel, this distance here is not parallel, or it's like this, then I know I'm going astray. But as long as it stays parallel, it's going to go to the left and come back, but it should always stay parallel to these stitches. So that helps you to do 2 lines of, whoops, can't see that. It helps you to stitch 2 lines of stitches that are parallel to each other with the grid. Now I'm going to go back to the stitch line and stitch guide and show you another way that I utilize it. So I'm going to go back to my screen here, and I'm going to turn off the grid. So I open it up, turn it off, close that, and go back to my stitch guide, turn that on, and that looks good to me. So now I just have, I need to move it back over. I want it back at my midline. So I'm going to put this at 0. So it's right where in the middle of the foot where the needle would drop. And I use this all the time for when I'm making binding, because when you go to bind your quilt, you have all these strips that you need to sew together. And typically you would put them at a right angle, like so, and then you sew from one corner to the other. And if you want to be really exacting, you could draw a line, but with this stitch guide, I don't need to draw the line. So I'll show you what I would do. I better put a straight stitch in here. That stitch would not be appropriate for binding. Okay, so we've got let's get this lined up here. So what I would do is I look at my stitch guide. Maybe I'll make it wider so you can see it better on the screen. Just bear with me for a minute. So now you should really be able to see it better. With the naked eye here at the sewing machine, it's very, very bright. For some reason, the cameras do not do it justice. So I would get my up in this corner, I would drop my needle and have the laser right there. And then I would point it right at this other corner and then just start sewing. And what I'm doing is I'm not watching the needle. I'm actually watching this point down here, because if it starts to deviate, then I know I've got to make a correction. So I just keep that laser right on that corner there, and then I'm good. And if you make a big quilt, you do a lot of these. You're going to be ending up doing a lot of these joins. So that's a quick way to do a join with your quilts. Now, another way that I utilize this projection is with our radiant stitches. And I want to show you what those are. So with the radiant stitches, they are this family of stitches that were designed to go on a curve, but they can be done straight as well. The sample just happens to have them all curved. But the idea is that there is basically a straight stitch, and then there's a kind of like a ray that goes off generally 90 degrees. Doesn't have to be 90 degrees, but generally you want it to be consistently the same angle. So you have a straight line, and then you'll have a ray, then you'll have a straight line, and then another ray. And you can do it without the stitch guide, without projection, but I'm going to show you a technique to make it easier using the stitch guide. Now, every time I let go of my fabric, it falls off. Oh, here it is. So I'm going to draw a line here. And I'm going to go into my settings, and I'm going to actually use 2 stitch guides. So right now I have stitch preview on. I'm going to turn that off so it's not distracting. We could leave it on. Right now but we have stitch guide 1 on with the red line, which is what you see on the fabric here. I'm going to go down to stitch guide 2, which I know is down here, and I'm going to open that up by touching on. And I want to make it a different color. So I'm going to touch the color wheel and go to this quick color green, and then select OK. And just check down here. I'll make it a little bit wider so you can see it better. And I want to put it at a 90-degree angle, and you'll see why in a moment. Then I need to go into my stitches, into the technique category, which is the 8th category. And I believe it's the 6th subcategory, yes. And I'm going to just choose the first stitch. Now, this is what the stitch is going to look like when it's stitched out. However, it is a program stitch where it stitches a little bit, then it stops in order for you to know that you need to turn it to create that ray, and then you have to turn it back. And you'll see what I mean as I'm demoing this. And by the way, there's a whole family of those stitches in the original icon, the performance icon, and the creative icon too. And there is also a tutorial with a video that shows you how to do these stitches. And if you haven't done them and you have those machines, you are missing out. You really should use them. They are great stitches. In fact, did I pull it out? No, I did not pull it out. I meant to pull out a table runner that I use these stitches on, that I thought it looked great. Anyway, so I'm going to show you how I used Stitch Guide 1 and Stitch Guide 2 to help to make these stitches better. So right now we created a red line with Stitch Guide 1 and a green line at 90 degrees with Stitch Guide 2. So I'll show you what it looks like on the fabric. So now I've got my red line and my green line. And maybe I could get this shot a little bit better. There you go. Okay. So I'm going to go up on my line here and drop my needle. Now, these stitches, as I mentioned, are program stitches. So it's best to use your start-stop button on the head of your machine rather than the foot control, because you could stop mid-stitch and then you'll get you get out of sync and it won't be good. So it's best just to use the start-stop button. And you may want to, if you're new to this, to turn down the speed of the machine, which is a slider on the right-hand side of the machine. So now I've got my needle down, and what I'm going to do is just touch the start-stop button, and when it starts to stitch, I want to keep this red line on my drawn line. So it takes a few stitches. Now what's going to happen is the ray is going to be formed by the sewing going backwards. So we need to turn the back of the foot in the direction that we want that ray to go. So we're going to turn it like this until our green line is on our drawn line. And that means it's at 90 degrees. And then we touch the start button and it's going to go out and come back. Then it's going to go forward with some straight stitches. So we turn our red line back to our drawn line. And my drawn line was freehand, so it's not exactly completely straight. So then now it's going to go backwards. So we're going to turn so that our green line is on our drawn line. Now I turn, it's going to go forward, so I'm going to turn back so the red line is on. Now with this stitch, we don't necessarily have to always have the rays going to the right. If we turn the back of the foot the other direction, we will then have the rays going that way. And in that case, you want the green line to be on the line that you just stitched. Now it's going to go forward just like the first two stitches, and we want the red to be back on there. So I'll show you what the end result is. So having those two stitch guides is helpful to keep this straight, and it just makes it a little bit easier, and you get into this kind of groove of red, green, red, green, red, green. So we've covered quite a bit, and there haven't been very many questions yet. So please feel free to ask any questions. Don't be shy, because otherwise I feel like I'm here talking to myself. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to switch over to embroidery. So we have quite a few ways now with the Creative Icon 2 to position our embroidery. Certainly, if you have it together and you get all your design on the screen, just so, then positioning is just a matter of getting it on the fabric where you want it. But sometimes we also make a design, stitch it out, take it out of the hoop, and look at it and think, oh, that I needed to put a little flower there. That's just empty spot there. So you put it back, and you really need to do a little bit more positioning. We've always had precise positioning, which is the most precise way to position something, because with our big screens, we can blow something up really to the point where you're seeing individual stitches. Like say you have a design with 2 individual stitches, and you can match the new design right to those stitches. So that it looks like it was never rehooped, and it's a continuous line if that's what you want. Like for instance, this pillow is actually 4 hoopings, and it doesn't look like 4 hoopings because I use precise positioning and it looks continuous. So something like this, you'd want to use precise positioning. And if we have time, I'll go over how to do that. But if you have something where, say you have a round applique and you want to put a flower right in the middle, or you have a pocket and you want to have a person's name right above that pocket, and you want it to be even with the top of the pocket. Something that doesn't have to be exact to the stitch, then using projection is much faster. So a question just popped up. How do you use the lines when you want to do a curve? Well, I'm assuming you're talking about the radiant stitches. And I would not use the 2 lines, probably not use the 2 lines with on a curve. I'd use 1 line rather than the 2 lines. I haven't tried it, but just thinking about it, I don't know the 2-line method would work for a curve. The reason it's nice with the straight is that some people, when they're doing that the radiant stitch, it's much easier actually to do it on a curve. It was designed to go on a curve. When you do it on a straight line, say this is your straight stitches, and then your ray that comes up. A lot of people end up with the ray not coming back to the baseline, and you have this kind of jaggy baseline. And using this technique, it makes it easier to get results where that baseline is very straight. And if it's not, just put a decorative stitch over it, like a very narrow satin stitch or candle wicking stitch, something like that. Which I did on these, some of these to give it more bulk anyway. Just this one right here, you can see I used kind of like a candle wicking stitch. So with decorative stitches, more is more. Okay, so I'm being asked what stabilizer. Okay, so In general, when you're doing decorative stitches, you are going to, I don't know of any decorative stitch that doesn't ask, that the screen does not recommend a stabilizer. I generally will choose my stabilizer based on the use of the what that stitch out is going to. Like, for instance, if it's going to be on something that's going to touch my skin, then I'm probably going to use something like Whisper Web Mesh, just because it's soft. It's kind of like fabric. If it's something that's going to be inside of something else, it's going to have a backing on it, my go-to is probably tearaway, because it's just easy to use, and you use it and you can tear it away. Some of the less elaborate, or most of the less elaborate decorative stitches, you could use this product called by Inspira called I'm blanking on it. It's a very thin stabilizer that was originally designed for quilting, that you would draw a design, place it on top of the quilt, and then stitched right through that stabilizer, and it tears away and it doesn't leave any residue. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name. I will look it up and put it in the notes later. But that's nice to use with lightweight decorative stitches, because it pulls away really easily and doesn't. Stitch and ditch. Yes, Amy, thank you. That's what it's called, stitch and ditch. And it comes in rolls, and it's great for, unless it's a very ornate decorative stitch, it's great to use for that, because it's so easy to remove, basically. So we got a question. Let's see. How did I do the curve you showed a few moments ago? Okay, so if you want to see how to do the curve, I would draw a curve, is the way that I would start out. So let's take something that's curved like this, and I'm going to draw that, or a bowl, something like that. You have to find a pin here. So I would use something curved to use as my guide. So I'm just going to draw around the edge of this tape. It's kind of a tight curve, but it should work. Hopefully you can see the ink on there. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to turn off my 90-degree stitch guide 2. And I'm going to touch my pattern restart button so I don't start in the middle of that stitch. And put my needle down. And I know it's going to take a few straight stitches. And what I'm watching is that my red stitch guide stays on my drawn curve. And then now I know it's going to go backwards. So I'm going to turn it so that this red line is basically perpendicular to my curve. Then it comes back, and I know it wants to go forward, so I'm going to turn it back and get that red line on my curve. Then I'm going to turn it, get this red line perpendicular to my curve. Then it's going to go forward. So I want to make sure it gets on the line. And as it's curving, I do need to move the fabric a little bit so that my straight stitch stays on the curve. So I am also watching in that cutout there so that I can see that it's going to do that. So now I'm going to do my ray. And I'm going to go forward, and I'm going to make sure that it stays on my line there. And then it's just going to go backwards again. And you just keep doing that. But with the curve, you do need, I don't think it'd be very good curve if you don't draw a curve with some sort of template to begin with. But this is a beautiful stitch to go on cuffs, on collars, along borders, in a decorative element when you're piecing. I love these stitches. So now I'm going to switch gears, and unless there's other questions about sewing, let's see, I have another question. Where can we find the pillow designs, please, that you showed? The pillow is in the My Sewnet library. So if you have a subscription to the My Sewnet library, like you have the Platinum or the Silver My Sewnet software, you can go to the library and get all those designs, or you can purchase individual designs. And this particular pillow is actually just one design. It is one corner repeated 4 times. So it's, I mean, the designs are not that expensive. Even if you do have to purchase it, it will probably be like $5-6 or something like that. And then you can make this beautiful pillow. So there really is a problem seeing yourself on the camera. I keep seeing stray hairs sticking up. It's like so distracting. Anyway, moving right along, we're going to go to embroidery and use projection in embroidery. So I have already made a little design. I made this little design in Shape Creator with two different mini designs. And you might notice that, in case you are wondering what kind of hoop this is a metal hoop. Is it metal or magnetic, Amy? It's made out of metal and it uses magnets. And so it's metal. Okay, it's a metal hoop. I love the metal hoops. They come in 4 sizes. And the reason why I love them is they're so easy to use. They are perfect for really delicate fabrics. Like if you are embroidering on something like tulle or velvet or organza, where if you were to hoop that, it would stretch the fibers. And I'm not crazy about using the spray all the time. I'd rather use that just once in a blue moon. And so I don't like any of that sticky stuff. So if I had sewn or embroidered on those things, I would have to kind of smush it down on the stabilizer and baste around the design. And it's so much easier to use a metal hoop. Also use it for things that are very thick and hard to hoop, like leather or vinyl, because you just lay the leather, the vinyl on there and plop these magnets down and you're good to go. I made actually 2 whole cloth quilts with a bigger hoop like this, where you do, you put the quilt sandwich in the middle on the hoop, plop the magnets down, you do 1 block, you pull the magnets off, and then you pull the quilt sandwich to reposition it, plop the magnets back down. So love these hoops. Little plug for metal hoops. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use projection to place a design in the middle right here. So the way that we do that, I'm going to change my view here. So right now I'm in sewing. I touch the icon at the top to go back and go into embroidery. And I want to turn on projection again. And I need to change my hoop size to the 100 by 100. And turn this back on here. Now I'm going to attach my hoop. And change my foot to the embroidery foot. So just bear with me a minute here. Okay, so in embroidery, when I turn it on, the light, the LED work light is the light that's underneath the arm. So it's the light that is right across, the bed of your machine. So in sewing for projection, we want the work light to go all the way down so we see our projected light very clearly. In embroidery, you want to bring it all the way up. So, or at least part way up. I'm going to bring it all the way up. Now, we do want to change the background color. Black means there's no background color. I'm going to change it to white. So going down at the bottom, Now what you'll see on your fabric is the projection. Now the projector is right above, it's right above this area. And if this is your fabric, the projection projects the light right onto your hoop. And it does not go like you can't tilt it one way or the other to, like, if it's on one part of your hoop and you really want it on another part of your hoop, you can't tilt it. What you need to do is, if it's projected here, you need to move your hoop so that the light is shining on the hoop where you need it. And I'll show you what I mean. So right now, my idea is that I want to put a design right in the middle here. So I need to bring my projected light into the middle, so then I can see what I'm doing as far as using projection to place an embroidery design in this circle. So it's a little bit kind of counterintuitive because, you know, I'll show you what I mean. When we go to projection here, we now have this dial down here. And when you press one of these arrows, it's going to move the hoop in that direction. And going back to our hoop here, to figure out which way you want to go, and this is kind of curved. Let's bring it right in front so it's a little bit more understandable. So I want this light to move up and over this way. So in order for the light to move up, what I actually need to do is I need to move my hoop this way. If I move my hoop towards me, the light will then be up there. So on the screen, whoops, wrong button. On the screen, what I need to do is I need to touch this down button. And the way these buttons work, it's a little bit confusing at first. You hold the down button a little while and nothing happens until you let go, but it will move the hoop. So I'm going to just hold it down and it makes this kind of clicking noise. And then when I let go, my hoop has moved. So now my hoop is better as far as up and down. Now I want this light to be to the right. So what I need to do is I need to move my hoop to the left. So I'm going to touch the left arrow, and you'll see what happens on my hoop here. So now I've got it in the middle, and I have that area in which to position my design. Now I'm going to go into my designs and pick a mini design to go in the middle. So now I have this design sort of floating in space on the screen. But if I go back to my hoop, you can see where it is. It's sort of flickering on my screen. It's not actually flickering in life. It's just the way the camera is interpreting it. So now I've got this in the projected area. The way that I position it, I'm going to go back to my screen. I'm just going to touch this and move it, and I will watch it on my hoop move. So I'm going to move it with my finger, but I'm going to show you what happens on the hoop. So I'm just moving it on the screen with my finger to get it positioned. So now I've got it in the center, and I can stitch that out. Now, if that's not exact enough for you, you know, precise positioning could be utilized, but this is a very quick way to position something that is, I don't think you really need to go into precise positioning in order to have a nice end result. And like I said, this is for things that are not like that pillow where you have to match stitch to stitch, or if the stitches come together like that, it's going to look terrible. When you have a circle and just a little doodad in the middle, you know, if it's off a millimeter, nobody's going to notice. And it's so much faster to do this. So it's a really easy, fun way to position things. It's really nice that we have at least, well, we have more than that. We have other methods to, we also have a cell phone app that will take a picture of your fabric and show it on the screen. There's a bunch of different ways to position things now that we have these more advanced machines. And any questions, because we're at the top of the hour? Okay, so if you have some questions, I will be monitoring this Facebook Live comment stream for the next few days. And if I see a new question, I will answer it. I really appreciate you spending the hour with me. I hope that it was helpful for you to learn how to use projection, or hopefully there's some of you that have been thinking about getting the creative icon too, and this has pushed you over the edge, because it is a wonderful machine. So we have some Facebook Lives coming up. Thursday, March 16th at 2 p.m. Central, Katrina Walker will be demonstrating piecing in the hoop. Katrina Walker is a great teacher. She's extremely knowledgeable. She's been in the sewing world for a very long time. And so that'll be a great class. Then we also have a My Sewnet Live on Wednesday, March 8th at 2 p.m. Central with our very own Amy, who's helping in the background, who will be doing some back to basic training. And I kind of list on that, back to basic training, kind of hard to say. So if you are feeling a little confused about where to start with My Sewnet, this would be perfect for you. Or you just want to brush up your skills, please join Amy on March 8th on the My Sewnet Facebook page for Facebook Live. So again, thank you very much for joining me. I hope that you all got a lot out of it. And I'm going to say goodbye. Happy sewing.